Unplug this thing from your car's cigarette port, and you got a portable power bank that will actually charge your dead cell phone up to a 100% charge. It's got a ridiculously bright flashlight, an emergency flasher. You can use this thing to break a window, and you can cut your seatbelt with it in case you get into a jam. Grab the Rugged Reserve 6-in-1 car charger. Your link is in the description.
And we begin with a wildfire alert and top federal officials on the ground in Northern California, where 48 people are now confirmed dead in the state's deadliest and most destructive wildfire in history.
For as long as man has existed, people who believe they have the moral right to control others and also believe that others have the moral obligation to submit to their rule, an arrangement known as government, have sought to utilize the latest technology in their lust to expand their scope of control. And they don't care how they acquire that control. That's what Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030 is all about for this country. Slowly erase American sovereignty, abolish private property, force everyone from rural areas to suburbs into prison-like smart cities, into smart homes, which are monitored by smart meters. If you want, I can talk more about the UN's plan for what they call sustainable living in another video. But right now, let me ask you a question. What would be worse than having your life virtually destroyed by losing your home and loved ones in a wildfire? What if that wildfire was started by what the government sees as a too-big-to-fail power company? And what if that too-big-to-fail power company added insult to injury by turning around and passing their liability onto their customers by raising their rates? And what if all this was done because a parasitic governor signed such a bill into state law?
In a rare one-on-one interview, Governor Jerry Brown opened up about the environmental challenges facing California.
We also touched on some controversial topics, beginning with the bill currently on his desk many are calling a bailout for PG&E.
I wouldn't use the word bailout.
What the hell did you just say?
I wouldn't use the word bailout.
But others do use that word in describing the firestorm of controversy surrounding utility giants like PG&E being allowed to avoid crippling costs when they play a role in how a wildfire sparks. The bill, which Governor Brown is expected to sign into law, would let PG&E issue bonds to help pay for any damages and pass on some of that cost to ratepayers.
What the hell is wrong with you people?
And so for taxpayers who say, why should we be the ones that keep them afloat?
Well, why should you be able to turn on your light and get electricity? Well, why should you be able to turn on your light and get electricity?
Is it a case of too big to fail, kind of?
Well, you could say that.
As bad as all this is, believe it or not, the devastating wildfires sweeping California may be even worse than we think. How about adding another layer of short and long-term injury by exposing Californians to toxic nuclear material? The Woolsey fire may have disturbed the nuclear waste site at the Santa Susana Field Lab, exposing many to deadly toxins in the air. As the Woolsey fire tore through more than 90,000 acres of Southern California, it scorched land at a closed-down lab where the US government and private companies tested nuclear weapons and rocket engines for decades, beginning in the 1940s. The Santa Susana Field Lab in the Simi Hills, right on the border of Ventura and Los Angeles counties, is now a federal Superfund site. Superfund is a United States government program designed to fund the cleanup of sites contaminated with hazardous substances and pollutants. It was the site of several nuclear accidents, including the worst nuclear meltdown in the history of the United States, when in 1959, facility operators intentionally vented nuclear material from the site's sodium reactor experiment to prevent it from overheating and exploding. By the time the leaks were closed, the site had released 459 times more radiation than was leaked during the better-known 1979 meltdown at 3 Mile Island. The lab property, now owned by airplane manufacturer Boeing, stretches for 2,800 acres in the Simi Hills and remains contaminated with toxic materials.
Now I want to tell you about this story that we mentioned at the very top of the hour about this new fire danger. You're going to find this fascinating. First of all, I want to tell you about the very worst nuclear meltdown in U.S. history. No, by the way, it was not 3 Mile Island. See, everybody thinks that because that's the one that got all the hype and the media attention and the movies and the television shows, right? 3 Mile Island. Actually, the worst nuclear meltdown took place in 1959, and it happened right on the border with Ventura and Los Angeles counties.
Thousands of people live within 2 miles of the site, and roughly 500,000 people live within 10 miles. The California Department of Toxic Substances Control said that as of Friday, November 9th, they believe there is nothing to worry about at the Santa Susana site in relation to the Woolsey fire. The department said in a statement, "Our scientists and toxicologists have reviewed information about the fire's location and do not believe the fire has caused any releases of hazardous materials that would pose a risk to people exposed to the smoke." Now, how many times has a government agency said something was safe only to find out later that people were dying of cancer from the very thing they once declared perfectly fine? Some scientists and physicians disagree with the government's assessment. Robert Dodge, a physician and the president of Physicians for Social Responsibility in Los Angeles, said in a statement, "We know what substances are on the site and how hazardous they are. We're talking about incredibly dangerous radionuclides and toxic chemicals such as trichloroethylene, perchlorate, dioxins, and heavy metals. These toxic materials are in Santa Susana Field Lab's soil and vegetation, and when it burns, it becomes airborne in smoke and ash. There's real possibility of heightened exposure for area residents." Weighing in with satellite imagery also tells a two-sided story. These images show that the fires did spread to the compound, but they didn't take down structures. With near-infrared imagery, dense vegetation appears red, while burn scars from the Woolsey fire contrast as dark brown. The physicians group also took a swipe at the California Department of Toxic Substances Control, noting that the state agency is the subject of an independent review commissioned by the California State Legislature to investigate its handling of the toxic site cleanups. So we've got another case of the government investigating itself. And what do you think they'll find? The Santa Susana Field Lab has never completely been cleaned up, and residents believe cancer occurs at higher than normal rates in the area. People who worked at the lab in the 1950s and who developed cancer are part of a designated U.S. Centers for Disease Control Special Exposure cohort and may be eligible for compensation for their nuclear materials exposure. The site is adjacent or nearby to several Southern California residential communities, including Simi Valley, Chatsworth, West Hills, Canoga Park, Woodland Hills, Thousand Oaks, and Moore Park. Several of these communities suffered fire damage, and California's State Fire Department estimates 370 structures in total have been destroyed in the blaze so far. One of the points of Agenda 2030 is to move people away from wildlands and into smart cities to live in smart buildings operated by smart meters. It's basically a big brother bonanza where the population is, in one way or another, discouraged from settling in outlying areas and into so-called sustainable developments. Guys, if you get something out of these videos and want to support more content to keep this channel going, the Patreon and PayPal links are in the description below. Even though several of my last designs have been rejected because SJW Snowflake seemed to be complaining about my shirts, I've still got more than 100 hard-hitting designs in the store. Your purchase helps to support the work I do here. Let the world and the Google Thought Police know what you think about Governor Jerry Brown, this PG&E bailout, and this nuclear site in the comments section below. I'll see you guys in the next video.